The series that we are presenting, this is the first of three. It's been funded by a Ministry of Education Pro Grant, which is an acronym for Parents Reaching Out Grant. And the committee applied for that back in May and received approval at the end of August, and so continued on with our plans for this evening. The committee is made up of 18 people. 12 of us are parent volunteers from various schools that are in the Frontenac family of schools, and that is Frontenac High School and the 5 official feeder schools that come into it. So Collins Bay, Halls Road, Henderson, Wellborn, and Lagunitas. And each of the schools has representation of a parent and a principal from each of the schools serves on the committee as well. And they've been tremendously supportive and helpful to the parents and being there and very much an active part of it. The recognition on everyone's part, parents and principals, was that parents are the principal advocates and primary caregivers of their children, and that their well-being, both on the physical side and on the mental side, is paramount to them. We begin at birth or adoption or guardianship with our children, and we walk with them throughout life. And they are one of the treasures of our hearts, and that was the focus of tonight. In considering various speakers, the Center for Excellence in Child and Youth Mental Health at CHEO was highly recommended by a local professional who had spent his life in that career path. Dr. Mannion is the executive director there, and you will see from his biography and brochure that he is highly credentialed, experienced, and engaged in child and youth mental health. When Dr. Mannion answered our initial email, he said that he was available and he was interested for follow-up. But to the committee, perhaps the most striking feature was his willingness to come tonight for a donation to the program at CHEO in lieu of any personal payment. Robert Brault wrote, "The little money I have, that is my wealth. But the things I have for which I would not take money, that is my treasure." Those things for which we make personal sacrifices often reveal our deepest heart's treasure. This evening, we have the privilege of sharing in something of Dr. Mannion's treasure, the opportunity to learn at the hands of a mental health researcher, psychologist, and advocate who works with combined skill and passion that can both instruct and inspire as he presents Healthy Minds, a Parent's Toolkit. On behalf of Frontenac Family of Schools and all of you, as committee chair, it is my privilege and distinct honor to present to you Dr. Ian Mannion.
I don't think I've heard my name referred to as doctor so many times in a short period of time in my entire career. My mother would be really pleased that you recognize that. She's the only one that's allowed to call me doctor. Thank you, that was lovely. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. You're going to notice that I walk around a lot. I move around, so I hope it doesn't upset you in any way. And I also pick on people in the audience. Only if you're in the first row, though. So if you want to get up and move, he has a stick and he knows how to use it. So you heard a little bit about me, and there's something that I typically do at the beginning of my talks that kind of warm people up. And I actually give you a bit of a questionnaire. So I know when you walked in, everybody got a pencil, I hope. Does everybody have one? Put it high in the air. Let me show you have a pencil. Excellent. Put it away because you don't need it. What you're going to do is I'm going to ask you questions, and if your answer is yes, you're going to stand up. If you can't stand up, you're going to put your hand up. Okay? If your answer is no, you sit down again. Okay? So if your answer is yes, you stand up and you stay up until your answer is no. If your answer is no, you sit down, you stay down until your answer is yes. Does everybody understand that? He understands. One person in the room understands. He had an unfair advantage. You heard this morning. And he can't give away any of my jokes. And the other thing is, some of these questions are personal and private, so we're going to keep it private in the room. I'm going to be talking about mental health, but a lot of other stuff. You're also going to find out that when I give a speech, I give a lot of stories. So with apologies to Beth, who's very organized, you'll see that I don't follow timelines at all. So it might be driving some of you folks crazy, but we'll play it by ear and see if you guys are having fun or not. So we're going to start with this questionnaire. The first question is, I like pizza. If your answer is yes, you stand up. With ham and pineapple on it. Oh, you almost are still standing up. I am a parent. Most of your parents, very important job. I'm the parent of an adolescent. Oh, most of you, but you're not sure. Adolescents are a little bit bigger and sometimes noisier. I'm a morning person. I didn't ask if your adolescent was a morning person. I've been snowboarding. I have been snowboarding. Yes? Perfect. I get stressed out some of the time. I get stressed out most of the time. I'm stressed out right now. Beth, are you standing? No, you're not. You're cool now. Okay. I cope well with the stress in my life. I cope well with the stress in my life. Okay? When things stress me out, I tend to keep things to myself rather than tell somebody else. When things stress me out, I tend to keep things to myself rather than talk to somebody else. Okay, so she's not sure. So if you're not sure, you have to do this. Until I tell you to stop. I usually get enough sleep. She just slammed herself down. I am a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Next question. I believe in miracles. All the Toronto Maple Leaf fans. I had my annual physical health checkup within the last 12 months. I had my annual physical health checkup within the last 12 months. Next question. I had my annual mental health checkup within the last 12 months. I had my annual mental health checkup within the last 12 months. And I ask you why so many fewer of you are standing. Isn't it as important? I like strawberries. I've been bungee jumping. That was just fun. Someone in my immediate or extended family has suffered from depression at some point. Someone in my immediate or extended family has suffered from depression at some point. Look around the room, folks. Okay? That's just depression. That's just your family. It doesn't include your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, the kids that go to school with your kids. It doesn't include every other mental health problem that you could imagine. I defy you to tell me that mental health is not a population health issue that affects us all directly or indirectly in some way. I play golf. I play golf well. There's at least some guys standing there. I believe that mental health is an important issue in schools today. Good for you. It is the #1 hot topic in schools, no matter where I go in North America. I smoked when I was a teenager. Next question. I smoked tobacco when I was a teenager. Oh! They're having a squabble here, and I don't want to know. I feel that there are adequate mental health resources for children and youth in my community. I feel that there are adequate mental health resources for children and youth in my community. That's actually not bad. Usually everybody's sitting down, no matter where I go. Because we have lots of need. We haven't have the resources to meet that need. I drank alcohol at least once over the last week. Well, now we have our priorities straight. Yeah. I drank alcohol last night. She doesn't remember. Dare I ask about this morning? I like popcorn with garlic powder on it. There's always some. Oh, lots of you guys. Excellent. I've engaged in some type of risk-taking behavior at some point in my life. I have engaged in some type of risk-taking behavior at some point in my life, and if you are sitting down, that means you've never had a drink of alcohol before the age of majority. You do not drive over the speed limit ever, and you are not a parent of an adolescent. Okay, everybody, okay, that's good. I am left-handed. Fair number. Last question. I know someone in my personal life who's made suicidal comments, engaged in suicidal behavior, or has died by suicide. I know someone in my personal life who's made suicidal comments, engaged in suicidal behavior, or who's died by suicide. Again, look around the room. If death by suicide is a marker for how well we're doing by our children and youth, there's a problem. When I do this with young people, they don't stand up and sit down. I have them move from one side of the room to the other. When I ask that question, the room tips over. And they stand there side by side looking at each other, knowing that these are big issues, and wondering why we can't have an open conversation about mental health issues and how to prevent mental illness and even prevent tragedies. Have a seat, folks. Thanks for indulging in that. Okay. Let's see if I can get all this stuff working. So, just read this to you. Nobody can possibly understand how I feel. I start to cry, I'm sure I'm never going to stop. Why do I keep getting these headaches? If I don't hit something, I'm going to explode. So what if I smoke up every day? I try as hard as I can, but I just don't understand things the way that I used to. I don't want to go to school anymore. If people knew what I was thinking, they would say that I'm mental. I wish that I could just stop feeling. These are all things that young people have said in my office. They don't say, I have depression, I have OCD, I have ADHD. They talk about the symptoms, the things that they're actually living on a day-to-day basis. We talk about child and youth mental health, it's actually quite complicated. These are some of the things that we know. It's common. 15 to 25% of children and youth, 6 to 16 years of age, could be diagnosed with a mental illness in the last 6 months. We know out of all those that could be diagnosed, only about 1 in 6 actually get service. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't get service. We'll talk about that later on. If you ask adults who have a mental illness, 70% tell us they first had those symptoms before the age of 18. 50% first had those symptoms before the age of 14. That means that this isn't an adult illness. This is a lifespan illness that starts in childhood and adolescence. That's where our opportunity is to identify things early and to intervene, so things don't get too serious, don't get too bad, too challenging for folks. I'm just going to turn this. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm not going to touch anything. I still have my back to you folks. We know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth. Who knows what number 1 is? What? Cancer? Not even close. Accidents of all types are number 1. Car accidents by far are the most common. All chronic illnesses and everything together doesn't equal suicide. There are not all that many young people that die. They tend to die of traumatic deaths because we're very good at saving people these days for medical concerns. We also know that when it comes to mental health problems, if you have one problem, you probably have multiple problems. If you have a mental health problem, you're more likely to have learning problems. You're more likely to have physical health problems. You're more likely to have problems perhaps dealing with child welfare or youth justice. It's complicated, so the solutions are also complicated. So we often talk about how important mental health is in schools these days. And again, it's a very, very hot topic, although our teachers also tell us they don't have a lot of training in this. They want more supports. They want more information so they can do their role effectively. They're not intended to be therapists, but they do play a role in terms of helping your kids and you as parents understand about what mental health and illness is. Help in terms of stigma reduction. Talking about promoting health and wellness. What are the tools that they can show kids and teach kids from a very young age? There's a reporter that asked me last week, first of all, this reporter told me he didn't believe the kids had mental health problems. And then he asked me, what age should you start training them and teaching them this stuff? And I said, well, preferably before they get to school. Parents can teach about mental health issues. And in every grade, there's something you can teach in terms of filling kids' toolbox with coping skills that they can use as issues come up over time. You don't wait for a crisis to start teaching people things. You find the teachable moments throughout their lifespan. So that promoting health is a very important thing that can be done in schools. Sometimes schools are where the problems first are noticeable. Teachers know their kids, their students, and notice when changes happen. And we'll talk about what you can notice as parents as well. Sometimes schools are where the delivery happens. That's the only place where some kids can get help with their mental health concerns. Think about a rural community where you're the only gaming town, or a cultural subgroup where the parents are very stigmatized by mental health issues, will never go see a mental health professional, but will allow their child to go to school and have those conversations, because that's something they value tremendously. The teaching of teachers is now changing. University of Western Ontario is now looking at how do we train teachers before they become teachers to get this stuff, to understand this stuff, so that it's in their back pocket when they actually start working in schools. Same thing goes for family doctors, who don't have much training in mental health, but they are also on the front line. The last thing is that teachers themselves have very tough jobs. And imagine putting up with your kids on a regular basis, right? But seriously, they do care about your kids. And caring exhausts people emotionally and physically. And when you have students, 1 in 5 that are having problems, by 1 in 5, those are diagnosable problems. About half children and youth will have mental health issues at some time or another. Not a disorder, but enough to affect their life in some way. So think about half of the students in the classroom struggling at times. And you're the one responsible for learning, teaching them so they can learn. You have to deal with stuff to be an effective teacher. So it wears heavy on the minds of teachers. Mental health and mental illness. So what is mental health? You know, when we asked young people years ago this question, they thought mental health was being crazy, with rubber rooms and schizophrenia and stuff. And then we said, well, what's mental illness then? So that's really crazy. Well, mental health is something that we all have. The same way we have physical health, we have mental health. And it's really the ability to experience, regulate, and express emotions. The whole emotional piece, relationships, and how we learn and interact with the environment. That is mental health. And when we have problems with that, we have problems with our mental health. So when we talk about children and youth, it's the healthy social and emotional development of our kids. And that's a goal for all of us, right? We want our kids to be healthy. So I'm going to show you a different way of conceptualizing mental health and illness. I'm going to use the fancy pointer. Some people think that it's on a continuum. So the whole thing is mental health. But on one side you have mental health and wellness. You do, the strengths and resiliency and attachment in your family, all the things that protect you. And the other side you have illness, different kinds of disorders. In the middle, you might have problems associated with certain kinds of stressors at home, at work, in the community, at school. Excuse me. The problem with this is it suggests it's black and white. You're either sick or you're well. The reality is that's not how it works. And I'll show you. How many here have a chronic physical illness? A major allergy, diabetes, asthma, high blood pressure, cholesterol problems, all those kinds of things. So about 20% of you probably have your hands up. Is it possible for you to have a good, healthy, functioning life with a chronic medical condition? Yes? And yes? How? Start medication? Management? Exercise? Diet? Attitude? How you think about it? How you live it? Anything else? Sorry? Stubbornness? Well, no, but the willpower to go through it, and the determination to not let it affect your life. You're going to do stuff you want to do anyways. Support systems, being able to generate and benefit from and be willing to open yourself to support systems. To use a support system, you have to tell someone you have that issue, right? Okay, excellent. Is it possible to have a good quality of life with a chronic mental illness? How? Same thing? Who agrees it's the same thing? I agree with you, it's the same thing. Is that how we teach it? Is that what young people think? That they can have a mental illness and still be well? You can be someone with depression who functions well. In my family, I have permission to talk about this, I suffer from depression. I've been diagnosed probably I've had it since I was 17, but I've had major bouts since then. I've had treatment, I've had medication, I've had therapy. I function, I think, pretty well. I've done okay in my life, in my career. And it's the same thing for me as if I had asthma or diabetes. Young people don't necessarily hear that message. They see the mental illness as being a death sentence, perhaps, or something that's going to define them for the rest of their lives, and they avoid it. Education is huge. That's why the mental health literacy piece was there. How do we make sure that people understand this stuff? Which is why I weaved it into the conversation today. So, this is my family. My cousin George, the basketball player. So all kidding aside, this is my family of origin. Notice anything about this lady here? Notice how happy she looks? That was my maternal grandmother. That's about as happy as I'd ever see her. She suffered from depression. My mother suffers from depression. My sister suffers from depression. My brother suffers from depression. That handsome young man with the glint in his eye is me. This brother does not suffer from depression. He's vice president for an international drug company. You saw a growth industry. He's jubilant. But our family is loaded for depression. I mean, it just runs in our family like crazy. These are some of my kids. I have 5 kids. And you might notice a few things. So, Melanie's the eldest. She has Down syndrome. She has a developmental disability, and yet she functions well. She's a public speaker. She gives speeches to medical students first year every year, and they remember that throughout their career. Rachel is next. Rachel has relapsing and remitting depression with her dad. She's been hospitalized 3 times. She almost died once. And she's incredibly functional now. She works for Air Canada. Her employer is completely dysfunctional. But she's very functional in her career. We're really worried about Caitlin. Can you figure out what the problem's with her? Well, she's a redhead. Emily, this is an older picture. Emily's now 19. She was a competitive figure skater who struggled through school. But she would get up every morning, be on the ice at 6:30. She was on the ice 20 hours a week, and went to school, and finished high school, and went to national finals, and did really, really well, because we found the thing that nurtured her soul, the thing that made her feel good about herself. It didn't happen to be school. It happened to be something else. But she still had success. That's the one boy. This is a long time. He's now almost 30 years old. He's a school social worker. You probably knew that seeing him back then, that's what he was going to be. But he deals with this stuff now professionally on a day-to-day basis. And he can tell you stories that would make your socks come off. So we're going to talk a little bit about stress. I asked you if you were stressed out. Everybody stood up. Stressed out sometimes. But let me talk to you about stress. You need to have some stress in your life. If you don't have any stress, you're probably dead. Okay? And we know something about stress. There's a link between performance and stress. So the more stress you have, the performance actually goes up. It motivates you, it generates you, it drives you to do things, right? Up to a point. And then your performance peaks, but any more stress past that, and then you start not perform so well. You start showing symptoms of distress to the point where you become completely dysfunctional. The trick is to motivate people to be in this beautiful, the zone up here, and to notice the symptoms when they're starting to get over the zone so they can use their coping skills to bring them back up to the zone. So how do we actually motivate people, create situations where they can have some stress but not overwhelmed? And the other thing is that some people's curve is like this. It doesn't take as much for them to get overwhelmed. And some, it's like this. There's a lot more of them to get overwhelmed. Lots of individual differences. Huge relationship between stress and how we function. You probably noticed that. How well do you function at Christmas? It's a good time, right? But huge demands on time, he's juggling things, you can become irritable. So to know what's dysfunctional, you have to know what's functional, you have to know what's normal. Let's talk a little bit about what's being normal at different ages. I know you're mostly parents of adolescents, but these are the kinds of things that we see that are more like developmental challenges or things that we see typically in different ages. So 6, you can see some of the things here. 7 in terms of how we use information and our self-awareness and some of our moods. As you get a little bit older, 10, social starts coming in, puberty, pre-puberty stuff, 11, 12, now you have some initial risk-taking behavior, more of the puberty stuff, more concerned about being normal. Who knows what normal is really? Being typical. You don't want to be different from your peers. You don't want to do anything that makes you look different than your peers. You don't want to tell anybody you have a problem with a mental illness thing, you're crazy or wacko, because that makes you feel even more different. And in adolescence, there's a lot of change happening. Lots of brain development happening at this time. There are physical changes, psychological changes, social changes, emotional changes. Risk-taking behavior increases, and it's actually normal. Some risk-taking behavior is normal. The adolescent who never engages in any risk-taking behavior I worry about, because they're over control. But there are limits in terms of risk-taking behavior. I'll give you an example of that. How many have kids with pierced ears, navels, other parts of their body? Is that normal? These days, I sure hope so. I didn't ask about your piercings, sir. These days, piercings are quite normal. It's fashionable, it's culturally appropriate, right? There are extremes. That's not normal. So, who here has ever had a child with an earache? Okay. What are the symptoms of an earache? Fever, so physical symptoms, yeah. Irritability. Pain, where's the pain? Inside? Okay. Anything else? Tears, emotional stuff. Sleeplessness. I don't want to ignore the people in the back, so excuse me. What? Grouchy, irritability. You're not talking about anybody we know, right? Anything else? Dizzy, off balance, hard concentrating stuff, yeah. Pulling on the ears, so it's behavioral stuff that's happening. Poor appetite, you don't feel like eating. Sleep disturbance. Do you want to go play? No. Want to go to school? Lethargic. Okay. And let me see how you did. Pain inside, dizzy, hard to concentrate, irritable, can't sleep, no appetite, stay home, less social, physical symptoms. You guys are brilliant. So what do we socialize our kids to do from a very young age when they have an earache? What do we taught them to do when they have an earache? Tell someone. And how long do we want them to wait before they tell someone? Why?
Because we know it's worse.
Gets worse, right? The longer you wait, the worse it gets. When they tell you they have an earache, what do? You call the doctor? How long do you wait?
You don't.
Why not?
It'll get worse.
It'll get worse, and they get infected, and then you have sleeplessness, and it's, oh gosh, your life is going to get difficult. When you go see the doctor, what does the doctor do? Medication, they know exactly what to do and what happens, usually. It gets better, right. Excellent. What are the symptoms of a psych ache? Correct. What have we socialized our kids to do from a very young age when they have a psych ache? Nothing. Anything else? Suck it up. What?
Sometimes, especially boys, tough it out. Or
Tough it out. It's a normal thing. You're just a teenager. You'll get over it. And it's just a phase. Give it time. So if they tell you about it, what do? You give them a hug.
listen,
You listen. You wait. You validate the feelings.
Let
Yeah.
them crawl in bed with you.
Let them crawl in bed with you. Try to comfort them.
just try to focus on what good you can.
Yeah. How many of you call the doctor? Depends on the severity and how long you wait. Often we wait longer. Lots of studies have shown that parents around mental health issues do what's called watchful waiting. Because they don't know what's normal and what's not normal. They don't know whether they should press the panic button yet. They don't want to embarrass themselves or somebody else because they have to talk about a mental health issue. We tend to wait longer. What happens when we wait longer? The same thing as an earache. The potential is there that it can get worse. and it can be harder to treat and harder to intervene. Well, it is hard to recognize, which is why we're going to talk about that now. You're my client. Perfect. So lots of different signs and symptoms. We kind of organize them in terms of behaviors, emotions, and thoughts, roughly, okay? And what you need to know is that the behaviors are really easy to see. We see behaviors easily. We don't see thoughts and feelings as easily. And sometimes we only look at behaviors. We look at irritable behavior and try to figure out why they're angry all the time, and don't necessarily understand the feelings that might be behind it. We see the acting out behavior, or we see the withdrawal behavior, the excessive behavior, or the reduction of behavior, but we don't necessarily understand what's underneath it. Sometimes the behavior is the tip of the iceberg, especially in school, where you're measured by your behavior, by your performance, by how you act or don't act in different circumstances. So you have to think broader than just what you see, but what it might mean. Lots of different symptoms. Most of these are normal at some point or time. Doesn't mean you have a mental illness, but when you have a radical change in any of these things, a change in your child's behavior, that might be a sign. To know a change, you have to know what the baseline looks like. So if you don't have a relationship with your kids, if you're not taking time to talk, if you don't know what's going on in their lives, how do you notice a change? Are you investing in them enough to be able to recognize when things are different? Not just developmentally different. The other things that you're looking for, excuse me, those changes are more intense than you would expect for their age or that circumstance or that situation. So you see other teenagers or other kids the same age in the same situation, your kid's reaction is 2 times bigger. That's a warning sign that the intensity is much more than it should be. If they last longer than they should normally, it's not a bad day, bad days. It starts being bad weeks, one into another. Then you start wondering because I have some water here, but thanks. So the persistence over time. If it's not appropriate for their age, if their behavior is not appropriate developmentally. So for example, is it appropriate for a 17-year-old male to have a beard? It's not legal, but is it appropriate? It's typical, right? Nothing wrong with that, really. Is it typical or appropriate for a 10-year-old to have a beard? It's the exact same behavior, though, but now you're looking at it with a developmental lens. All of a sudden, the same behavior isn't as appropriate, given the age. Lots of young kids have problems with sleeping, right? Is it appropriate or typical for a 2-year-old to want to sleep in their parents' bed? Is it appropriate or typical for a 16-year-old to sleep in their parents' bed? And yet, that happens a lot when people have anxiety disorders. They have trouble separating from their parents. That could be a flag. A behavior that's more typical for a different age might be a flag for a mental health issue. The other thing is that these things have to interfere with one or more aspects of a person's life. Their school life, their social life, their family life, or their vocational life. That's when you start looking at dysfunction. The combination of symptoms, intensity, severity, age appropriateness, and dysfunction equals mental illness. That's what a mental illness is. The kinds of mental illnesses you might hear about, and I'm going to make this very, very, very strong point. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illnesses we see in children and youth. We know more about how to treat anxiety disorders than any other problem. We have more success at treating anxiety disorders than probably any other problem. And yet those are the ones that are most invisible to us. ADHD is quite common, probably is overdiagnosed in some respects, overtreated in many cases, but still it's significant. Conduct disorder, about 4%, mood disorders, about 4%. Substance use disorders are rare, but co-occurring substance use with these other things is quite common. Others, things like eating disorders, 1 to 5%. Schizophrenia, much rarer. It starts to occur in later adolescence. So any one disorder is about 14%. That's some work done in British Columbia. Well, let me get to a different way. This is data we have from our community in Ottawa. We ask young people how often they feel really stressed out. About half of the young men and almost 3/4 of the young women say they feel really stressed out on a regular basis. Probably the same number of people that stood up today. 1/3 of the young men and almost half of the young women say they feel really depressed on a regular basis. That's not clinical depression, that's just feelings of depression. Some of them tell us they feel that way every day. It's about 5 to 10%, which is what we know is not is close to the clinical rates of depression in adolescence, not childhood. So this actually describes anxiety better than those graphs do. This person here, this is a bureau done by young people. They told us what they think anxiety is. And they say the person with anxiety feels like this person here. They're surrounded by people that are watching them. They don't know that they're being judged all the time. They're always apprehensive. They feel the world is kind of closing in on them. They feel powerless. And they feel that way every day. If you felt that way, would you want to go on the bus to go to school? Would you want to go to school? Would you want to leave home? It'd be terrifying. So my daughter felt like this every day. It'd be overwhelming. Yeah, go ahead.
Feelings of depression and clinical depression.
So-
The diagnosis?
So the difference between, I'll get to depression in a second, you'll see it in a second. But it's the same kinds of things. You can have feelings of depression, like you can feel sad, right? A diagnosis of depression has to have a certain number of symptoms at a certain severity with certain outcomes. Let's talk a little bit more about anxiety first, because I think you folks did a survey, a lot of people in this community did a survey. Anxiety was a common issue that you raised, worrying about your kids. And everybody has worries. You're supposed to have some worries. Anxiety actually helps us, like that graph showed. It's a problem when it makes the decisions for a child, interferes with your life, and it causes distress. So that's this dysfunctional stuff. So from a school perspective, these are kids that refuse or reluctant to go to school. Their grades decline. My daughter was smart, never handed in assignments because they would never, she thought they weren't going to be good enough. She was afraid of being judged. Crying bouts, fear of new situations. They're slow to warm up, so they don't want to go on a sports team unless you're the coach. I've had kids like that in my family. They're easily frustrated, lots of physical complaints. Often kids with anxiety have stomach aches and headaches and traveling pains, and they don't go see a mental health professional. They go see their family doctor because of all these things going on in their body. That's their body giving them warning signals that they're not coping well. Usually anxiety, often anxiety. And it can also affect the peer interaction. They can withdraw from peers. They can be an outsider kind of looking in with their peers. And if you're that anxious all the time, sometimes you're so anxious, you're processing all the things that you're obsessed about, and there's no room to think about schoolwork and performance and concentration. It can affect your concentration significantly. Think about the impact on marks, right? So they take longer to finish their work. They might not want to start something new, a fear of getting it wrong. They might overreact to situations, and they might fall behind just because they're just so anxious they can't be there physically at school after a while. I'm going to try to show you this. We're talking about depression. The sound's fine. Oh. Well, we're not going to talk about depression. We will talk about depression, but we're not going to show the video. Is it possible to check why that one's off? Because we'll have another one later on. So, this is another mural that young people have done. They talk about being depressed, but you can actually feel alone in the middle of a room of people. Because you can't experience the positivity that might be around you. So, about 4 to 8% are going to have depression. 20% will have it during the life course, about 20%. It's not just being sad, like you were asking, okay? In adolescence, it's more likely to be irritable mood than sad. So you think someone's really pissed off and angry, that might actually be some symptoms of depression. But the other things you see is the appetite stuff, all the vegetative things. They withdraw from things they used to enjoy. When they stop doing things they used to enjoy, like they play the guitar, and now they won't pick it up anymore. They don't go see their friends anymore. That's called anhedonia. That's the clinical term. It means loss of enjoyment in things that you used to enjoy. That's a hallmark feature of depression. Their thinking gets distorted. It's like the world is now viewed through dark glasses. Doesn't matter. They can't feel the positive things. They filter it as if it's negative all the time. And there can be suicidal thoughts. It does tend to run in families, and we've done some studies on that, especially looking at how depression kind of accumulates in families over time. Very treatable. 80% of those that get treated for depression have some relief, have some benefit. Lots of different treatments. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is the kind of therapy that's shown the most promise. Medication can work, but you should never use medication just by itself. It should be monitored very closely. And unfortunately, it does tend to be a chronic disorder. If you've had a major depressive episode, you're more likely to have another one. Yes?
Would you not add, with CBT, would you not add also neurofeedback or other aspects like that?
Biofeedback?
Yeah, neurofeedback, biofeedback.
So there are all kinds of different therapies. Biofeedback is less studied than CBT. There's less good information on that. Cognitive behavior therapy is probably the most studied therapy in the world and showing good outcomes. Yes?
Exercise.
So you're absolutely right. When I see young people, I always, let me give you an analogy for medication. Let's say you're in a boat with a friend, and the friend falls overboard, and they don't know how to swim. Okay? So while they're out there drowning, you say, okay, now kick your feet, go kick your feet, you can do like this with your arm. You can't, they're so panicky, you throw them a life preserver. And then when they calm down, then you teach them how to swim and they get back to the boat. Sometimes medication is like a life preserver. It allows take the edge off so they can benefit from the other skills you're trying to teach them. Sometimes you're so depressed you can't benefit from cognitive behavior therapy or anything else. The other thing that you said about exercise and diet, every time I see a young person, I ask about sleep, I ask about appetite and eating, I ask about caffeine, and try to make the other parts of their life so they're functioning well physically, because that can also have an impact on their mood. We know there's a huge relationship between sleep and mood. So if you're not, what happens if you don't get a good night's sleep? You're irritable and grumpy. So same thing happens for young people who actually need more sleep, even though they don't want to go to sleep. So there's some innovative things happening. There is a program in New Zealand. They've developed a role-play game online based on CBT principles that works. It helps young people overcome depression. Not every young person, but this has been published in the British Medical Journal. They've shown that there are some things like this, tools that are engaging young people in conversation that allows them to start looking at their world in a different way, even if they're depressed. That program is called Sparks. These are suicide numbers, and these might be disturbing to you. They're real numbers from our community in Ottawa, like 20,000 youth that we've talked to. And this is, I think it's a 12-year span. 17% of young men and almost over 30% of young women tell us that they have thought of suicide at some time in their life. It's a very common thing to think of. 7% of the young men and 13% of the young women tell us that they've thought that way within the last 3 months. And almost an equal number, 7% and 16 here, tell us that they have actually done something that they consider to be something that could have ended their life. They did a suicidal gesture. So suicide, death by suicide is rare, but all the thinking and the behaviors are actually quite common. And often are a symptom of someone who has very limited skills right now to cope with whatever they're facing, and they're overwhelmed. Our job is to fill their toolboxes so that they're not stuck with this as their only option. They have many more adaptive options to deal with things. This slide, out of all the young people that were suicidal, that said that they had thoughts of suicide and made suicidal attempts, out of all of them, we asked them who they told. 45% of the young men told us they never told anybody. 32% of the young women. That's the major number I want you to look at. 45% of young men were suffering in silence, didn't even tell a friend. Not even a friend. So that's kind of scary, right? What's the good news about that slide? Anything positive about that slide? Except for those that heard my talk this morning? They're still alive. Sorry? So the majority are telling somebody. Anything else? They just told us. For the first time in their lives, they've actually told somebody. And they told somebody because we created a situation where it was okay for them to tell us. Even though they knew the limits of confidentiality, we had to do something about it, they still told us for the first time in their lives. So we can't have that conversation, having it done in such a way that's protected. This is who they told us they talk to when they have a mental health concern. Young men, it's about mental health, not suicide. Most of them don't talk to anybody. If they talk to anybody, it's a friend. Women, young women, girls, mostly friends first, followed by nobody. Families, about 10%, but that's not necessarily parents. That can be grandparents, siblings, uncles, aunts. Professionals, they don't think about talking to me at all. Although, the wait lists are huge to see people like me anyways. So you gotta see the thing there. And it's kind of weird, right? So only 10% of them think of talking to their family members, not necessarily parents. If you ask parents, they said, well, if your kid were to talk to somebody about a mental health concern, who would they talk to? Parents overwhelmingly say, well, talk to me. Or they'll talk to their grandparent, or they'll talk to my spouse. And then with the other people. Friends are only 18%, right? Whereas it's overwhelmingly the number one person that you would talk to. Sometimes as parents, we don't get it. We don't get the fact that they may not be talking to us. And we should be okay with the fact that they're talking to somebody. And encourage them to talk to somebody, even if it's not us. And sometimes that somebody, for another kid, might be you. They'll talk to you rather than talk to them, and that should be okay too. We shouldn't be so hung up having to control all the information that has to be us all the time. We asked young people, why don't they talk about things? 63% said stigma would keep them from talking about things. Embarrassment, peer pressure. 19% said they wouldn't even know they had a problem. 12% said they wouldn't know where to go for help. So stigma is huge. This is how young people describe the mental health system. They say that if I get labeled a mental illness, I'm going to be viewed as a monster that has to be controlled, chained up, locked away. I don't want that, so I'm not going to tell you anything. And of course, that's how they perceive me. Your mental health professional is this crazy guy who's going to do things to me. Right? So if that's how you feel about the system, there's no surprise that you don't want to get into it. You don't want to get help from it. So sometimes the problems are more subtle. This is a classroom in Toronto. Notice the Montreal Canadiens jersey? But think about kids with subtle differences. That limp, talk funny, wear different clothes. Maybe their clothes are poorer than the other clothes. Maybe they're of a different color. Maybe they have an accent. Maybe they have a subtle mental health issue. Maybe they have a pronounced mental illness. How are we collectively in our communities in terms of accepting some of those differences, even if you happen to be in Montreal Canadiens today? Now, so this is another mural done by young people in our community, and they say that all young people are different. We shouldn't treat them all the same. And they say it's not the person with a mental illness's responsibility to somehow magically get out of their funk and become well, pull them up by themselves by the bootstraps. It's our responsibility collectively to connect with this young person and help them get there. Pretty powerful statement. They did this in a week. I've known people that have spent decades writing books that haven't been as eloquent as that picture. Lots of protective factors, lots of things that we know help young people. So good problem-solving skills, learning those from a very young age is going to be helpful. Social skills, a resilient personality. We'll talk more about resilience in a minute. Sense of belonging. People that feel that they have roots, that they belong to something, they're engaged in something, are healthier physically and mentally. One secure attachment figure, one important adult in their life, whether it's a family member or not, is the most protective thing that we know from all the literature out there. Caring, supportive adults within inside the family. Pro-social peers, that's not the Hells Angels. Okay, these are friends that role model good behavior and appropriate things. Limit setting, we need good limits, not just carte blanche. Where is the opportunity to develop that self-esteem, like that daughter who's the skater? And a healthy lifestyle, which is all the eating and sleep and everything that we talked about before. All very helpful. Let's talk a little bit about resilience. Resilience includes two things. Adversity and the ability to overcome adversity. That's how you become resilient. Now picture a kid who's never had any adversity, who's been bubble wrapped their entire life, who has a helicopter parent that hovers over them all the time to make sure that they don't bump into anything throughout their entire life. How is that young person going to become resilient? How do we teach our kids to fail forward? To learn something from failure? I'm going to give you an extreme example. There's a young woman in our community who was a very successful student in primary school, all A's, high schools, all A's. Got to university where she wasn't very well known, got her first C and jumped off a building, died. She was not resilient. She had no way of coping with that one thing. That one thing, the first time she experienced something, her toolbox was empty. She never had the opportunity to learn to deal with adversity. Okay, did anyone, I want to show hands, everyone who has never failed at anything, hands up please. You've never failed at anything? It's hard because we've all failed at something. What have you learned from that? And sometimes those lessons are tough, but worthwhile. So this is about, well, there's no sound, right? I don't know what happened to sound. This isn't going to work. Let's just see it back. Back. Good. That father and that son. Yeah, they're interacting. It was a special moment, right? Think about the attachment now that happens between that father and son. Think about the opportunities now between that in terms of, as a father, it's not a mother. Think about the attachment of a father, the role of fathers in that. Think about those special moments. Think about how those moments can be created when they're older. My son, who's now 28, we used to go in the car, right? I'd have talks with him in the car because he couldn't escape. And the phone wasn't ringing and I wasn't doing something else, there was no TV or anything. And it would start off by, we'd be there and I would talk to him and he'd say, "Stop psychoanalyzing me, Dad." And then years later, when things would be difficult for him, he'd come up and he'd say, "Dad, can we go for a drive?" Which was code for, "Can we talk?" That's where those relationships start. And you nurture them all the way through. So, I'm curious, who's seen this ad, okay? Employment opportunities. One couple to procreate or raise a child. No experience necessary. Applicants must be available 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, and must provide food, shelter, clothing, and supervision. No training provided. No salary. Applicants paid, this is an old one, it's now $250,000. Over the next 18 years, accidental applications accepted. Single people may apply, but should be prepared for twice the work. Who saw this ad before you came prepared? I did not see this ad. Nobody warned me. Okay, so parenting is a tough job. And so this is, you can actually prevent some problems in parenting. So I'll just show you this clip, I hope.
Zazu condoms. Fun, sexy, safe.
So there are some problems you can prevent. Not everyone is willing to use every way of preventing things. But do you feel for that parent? If you're in that parent in a grocery store with your kids screaming and yelling, everybody's judging you, you're feeling it, you're thinking, oh my God, he's a terrible parent. That's quite typical behavior. You see it all the time. Well, not quite that extreme, but it's hard being a parent, right? What's our job? Our job is to try to help them maintain emotional control, establish limits when they're young, develop responsibility, independence, positive self-image, learning to live with the consequences of their own decisions when they're making choices, to learn from their mistakes, failing forward, like I said, and living in the gray zone. The world is not black and white. Helping them learn to appreciate that is very tough. Most of us think in black and white. We're good, we're bad, we're pretty, we're ugly, we're fat, we're skinny, we're a success, we're a failure, we're sane, we're crazy. The world isn't black and white, it's gray. If it was discipline you needed, why didn't you ask for it? It's not their job to tell us how to do our job, it's our job to take our responsibility even when it's tough. So think about the conversations that you have with your kids. Do you pepper them with questions? There's something called the 50-50 rule. That means if you're talking with your kid, you own 50% of the airtime, no more. So if you're talking with them, you can ask them some questions. Here's some examples of things that you can ask them that are not yes and no questions. Open-ended questions that invite conversation. But they don't have to answer you. And sometimes it's important for you to stop talking and let them have their airtime, even if they decide that their airtime is going to be silence. And sometimes when you're silent, they actually start talking. When we're nervous, we fill every moment with speech. It doesn't give room for anybody else to have dialogue. And then that's when they have a button behind the ear, they press it, and they stop hearing you. Can you imagine if they press the button and you're not talking anymore, they're looking at you, your mouth's not moving? They check to see the button's working or not. They realize you're really not talking. And they might start talking. But not right away. So that's the 50-50 rule. What happens? Whoa, what is that? Okay, well, let's ignore all that squiggly stuff. When you go on a plane, what do they say if we should lose cabin pressure? What's the next thing you hear? Remain calm. And what happens? If we should lose cabin pressure, put your own mask on first and then help somebody else. Why? You can't help if you pass that. Okay. Exactly. So, let's talk about your mental health. We're talking about destigmatizing, we're talking about seeking help, opening conversations, being willing to accept help. Do you do that? Do you role model that? If 1 in 5 kids has a mental health concern, that means 1 in 5 parents has a mental health concern. 20% of you probably suffer from a mental illness. Welcome to the club. It's a great club. Well, what do you do in terms of your own lifestyle? Eating, sleeping, substance use, your social network. Do you accept help from others? I used to give parent groups, it was called Parent Stress, and I had this one exercise. I said, you know, when you're having a really rough day and you're in the backyard and you're yelling at the kids, and your neighbor comes to the front door with a casserole, and you feel mortified because they probably heard you yelling at your kids, I want you to do this. I want you to say, thank you. Take the casserole. Because next week, when he's yelling at his kids, you can bring a casserole over to them. Don't bring the same casserole. That's a bad thing. Okay? But you really have to be able to nurture those support networks. I gave that speech once, and the audience were parents of kids with Down syndrome, because I have a daughter with Down syndrome. And I was saying that, and everybody was laughing, and it was wet. And this one lady got up and she says, "That's just stupid." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "I live in this little town in the middle of nowhere. I'm the only one in that town that has a kid with Down syndrome. And you make it sound so easy, like people just come and help you. And that's hogwash. You shouldn't be saying that." And I'm kind of shrinking. I don't know what to say. So I stay quiet, hoping that someone's going to say something. And a lady across the room goes, "Where do you live?" She goes, "I live in," and she mentions a little town. The other lady says, "Well, I live in," as a town next to her town. "And we're having coffee next week." And I went, support networks happen if you're willing to disclose and you're willing to accept. Are you willing to disclose? Are you willing to accept help? What are your role model in terms of recognizing your own signs of stress and burnout and perhaps dysfunction? Are you seeking help? Not many of you stood up for your annual mental health checkup. Would you consider doing that? Even having a conversation with your family doctor about how that should be part of your annual physical checkup. Put the two together. What's out there? Lots of different resources are out there for parents, teachers, and youth. E-mental health is something that we've developed in our shop. It has fact sheets for parents on mental health and illness. It has some screening tools that you can use. It has resources in various communities. Lots of other ones out there as well. Youth engagement is something that we know really promotes wellness and decreases risk. So we've developed programs around youth engagement in our community. One called YouthNet, that's one that we started in the early 90s. It's now the one that we had all that data from is from YouthNet. And that program, it's almost 20 years old now, has been replicated in communities across Canada and has also been replicated in Europe, in the UK. And it's really about community-based mental health promotion. It's run by young adults, supported by caring professionals. Dare to Dream is a program that now exists and you folks are eligible for. Young people with good ideas, we try to encourage them to implement their good ideas, and we give them money to do it. The whole program is run by young people. We've hired an 18-year-old who's in our shop who runs this. All the adjudicators are young people from around the province who bring together. All the applicants are young people. You have to have a mentor, but the applications are by young people. And they come with amazing ideas. What we know is when young people are engaged in things bigger than their problems, they do better. The story I told this morning, I'll tell it again. It's a young woman, 16 years old, severe mental illness, diagnosed with 20 different things, got kicked out of every hospital and every service in our community. She was a cutter, she was on drugs, and she went to YouthNet, and one of the facilitators asked her a question. She says, when do you feel good? She says, I feel good when I'm snowboarding. That's why the snowboarding question is in my list. Because when I'm on the mountain and the wind's in my hair, I feel competent, I feel talented, I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile, and I wish other young people could experience that. And the people at YouthNet said, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you have other young people snowboard? She says, I can't do that. I can't develop a program. I'm a little piece of shit. No one's going to listen to me. He said, we'll help you. So she organized a snowboarding program for young people. And the snowboarding program was once a week for 5 weeks. She would bring them by bus to a ski lift, free ski pass, free lesson, and a banquet after 5 weeks. And the conditions were that, first of all, none of the people had to know how to snowboard. They had to be equally incompetent. The other thing, they had to have $1 a week. They had to pay $1 a week. Because some of the youth that were there were homeless. And she said, even a homeless youth can find $1 a week. And the last condition was that Dr. Mannion had to come with us. And she coached me to snowboard. And I was completely incompetent. At the end, there was an awards banquet for the most improved snowboarder, for the best dressed snowboarder, for the biggest injury. I won the prize for the biggest injury. And I complained, I didn't get hurt. I fell a lot, but I wasn't injured. She goes, we were referring to the bruising of your ego. But engagement, and that young woman, her goal in life was to be dead before she was 18. She was 16, if she didn't die before she was 18, she was going to kill herself on her 18th birthday. That was her life. That was her life trajectory. She was recognized as one of Canada's outstanding young people, profiled in Reader's Digest. The International Youth Commonwealth Committee gave this group of young people awards. They came from the UK, gave them medals and some money to keep the program going. She worked at the Governor General's estate, and now works in the federal government and writes us letters now and then. She's now in her 30s, got past 18, and talks about how someone took the time to listen and to find the strength and to pull on that strength and to build and believe in her, which had helped with her self-esteem and dramatically improved her mental health. I'm not going to show that. So, I really believe what's written here, that working together we will contribute to the creation of caring and supportive environments that maximize learning and well-being and strengthen young people, families, schools, and communities. What's hidden inside of here basically is that mental health is everybody's business. It's you as parents, it's young people themselves, it's schools, it's communities, it's coaches, it's police officers, it's lawyers, it's judges, it's family doctors, it's religious groups, it's everybody's business. And if we do it together, we actually have a chance to create some magic, to make some time so young people feel that they're part of something, they feel supported, and in times of difficulty, they feel that they can disclose and get some help and get through it. That's what this is all about. So, what we're going to do now, two things. First of all, shameless plug. The people that I work with have said that mental health is one of the targets for November. So I had a mustache 20 years ago, before YouthNet started. And when I started working with youth, they said, shave off that cheesy thing, you look like a porn star. They actually said pedophile. But now, 20 years later, the same young people who are much older are saying, no, you should go and grow a mustache because young men don't talk about mental health enough. And do it to make more conversation about men's mental health. So that's what we're doing. This next portion is your time. Okay? We have 20 minutes for question and answers. Maybe we can lift up the lights.